Last year, I created a video to help you guys understand each tarot card definition in an interactive, fun, relatable, and stress-free way. If you want to see that video, I'll leave a link down there in the video description. It did pretty well. I think people really liked the idea of trying something that's a bit more approachable than an overwhelming book. And all that video basically is a technique that I created. I read tarot, and each letter of that sentence can give you a prompt to think about when pulling a card. So I think the best way to learn tarot is to pull one card a day, and then you get this card in front of you. It's a little bit overwhelming. You don't really know what you're doing with it. You don't know how to approach it. So that technique basically gives you a set of prompts to help you understand the kinds of things that you should be thinking about to do with the card so that you can understand it better. Now, the first letter on the acronym is I. And I stands for initial reaction. It can stand for intuitive thoughts. It can also stand for immediate thoughts, but it's basically the initial response that you get to the card when you first see it. And intuition around tarot is a very interesting conversation to start with, so I'm going to dive a little bit into that. I don't think it's a good idea to have a card fall out onto the table in front of you and for you to immediately go scrambling for your trusty dusty tarot book. I think there's a lot of conversation in the tarot community about whether guides, deck guidebooks and tarot guidebooks are a good thing for learning tarot. In fact, a lot of people believe that you should completely just throw that book out, burn that deck tarot guide. You don't need another person's perspective on what the cards mean, what they, on a fundamental level, are trying to translate. There's a whole lot of controversy out there for intuitive tarot readers. I think, for me, you can't have one without the other. I don't think you can have someone who's read every tarot book in the entire universe read you an accurate tarot reading, and I don't think there's someone who only goes by intuition who can read you an accurate tarot reading. I think they both go hand in hand, and I also think that trusting someone to read your cards who only goes by intuition is like expecting a German person to be able to read a French story. There's going to need to be some kind of fundamental understanding and what the cards are communicating and what the key words of a story that is being essentially told in front of you is saying, because that's what tarot is. It's a story that's being set out in front of you, and I think that your intuition can kind of breathe into the gaps between those keywords to bring the story to life. But I don't think that we can go by our intuition solely to actually pick up on what those cards mean when it comes to the language of tarot, because tarot is a language. That's what it is. You can't be a tarot reader if you don't know how to read the elements, the meaning of numbers that are behind those elements. Because tarot is a language, get 10 tarot readers in one room and show them the same 4 set of cards, and all of those readers are going to read those 4 cards in a similar fashion. They're going to know what the basis messages and meaning behind that story that's being told is saying. Sure, they might say it in a different way. It might come across in very different angles, and it might feel very different in how it's delivered from each of those readers. But that's when intuition comes in. That's when the personalization behind each reader comes in. And that's why we pick different readers that we resonate with, because we like the way they tell their stories. We like the way they connect to their intuition, to us, to the cards. It's weird to me that someone would want to pick up tarot reading and not actually understand what historically each card represents on a basic level. To me, that seems like you know better, or you don't care so much about what each card meant when it was created and what it's meant over the years of time it's been used. It's like a chef wanting to learn how to cook and be a really good chef, but refusing to know the science behind what makes food good and healthy, and like not being open and willing to listen to what the thousands and millions of chefs before him have learned and their trial and errors and what they proved to them as working. And what's interesting to me is it's not as though there's no other option. If you're someone who wants to read cards intuitively, that's what oracle cards are for. I think that you can maybe pursue that direction a bit more then. You don't have to be, you don't have to choose tarot if you don't want to learn tarot. So just because I starts the acronym, just because I think intuition and immediate response is the first thing that you do when you see a card, it doesn't mean that it should come generally before the R in the acronym, which is research. Generally, I think that stuff should be dug into first, but then when it comes to practice and you trying to like develop on your own skill and your own way of telling tarot and like connecting with your own intuition and guides, you need to get back in touch with like the many different possibilities that card can be reaching you from. Anyone who's getting into tarot, who's reading about different definitions, is well aware that there are meanings that are coming out of your eyeballs. It's crazy how much definition can be behind one singular card. The Empress isn't just about a mother figure, it's about growth, it's about abundance, it's about fertility, it's pregnancy, it's financial prosperity, it's good health, a really pretty garden that someone's tending to. Like, there are so many things. It makes you kind of think like, oh my God. So like, I can't sit here and tell someone who I'm reading that they could expect this or that or this or that or that and just give them all these like overwhelming possibilities. That's not an accurate reading. So it's good to have that basic foundation of what it could possibly be pointing towards, but it's up to you to decide which one is trying to talk to the client, depending on your intuition and depending on the other cards that are falling close to it as well, because they will all intuitively talk to each other. So to me, a tarot reader who refuses to read any book on tarot, I think is very similar to someone who wants to pick up French but refuses to learn the definitions of each word and instead intuitively guess what they think it might mean depending on their gut. They might get a fair few right. Like if they're seeing a certain word on a lot of like food packages, they might have a good shout at what that could be, but they're kind of like misusing where the intuition is being placed. So kind of see the 78 cards in tarot as 78 words. So instead of having like an alphabet that you're learning 78 different words that are associated to 78 different cards. And it's up to your intuition and your gut to pull like the sentences in between those words to make them speak, to make them come to life. And I think also that is why you never stop learning tarot as well, because you can only be as good as a tarot reader as you are as an individual. Like, those cards aren't going to speak themselves. I have to pull out some of my own kind of like life experience to help my client understand like the best case scenario. If I'm a young child and I haven't gone through much, I'm going to be quite crap at giving them advice that I'm picking up intuitively from the cards. I myself like going to older, more mature tarot readers because I feel like they've got life experience behind them too. Like, this isn't just about going by like what they see in the cards. Like, they might see a bad situation coming up, but like if they can't articulate how to go about the best way out and the best route for me to achieve the best results, then like what's the point in knowing that? And I think that is essential with tarot, like to apply logic to intuition. It's like yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. For instance, if I receive a booking from somebody who wants guidance in the best way to go about buying a house, like they're in the middle of sorting out a mortgage, but I have absolutely zero experience in that myself. Sure, I can do my best at like picking apart the general advice, such as like be persistent, or it might be like look somewhere else, don't make any hasty decisions. But then to truly like pinpoint the topic, I kind of probably want to rely on some of my logic to apply to the stuff that is sticking out, because you can structure some more like practical solutions, some literal solutions as well. So if you're quite good at giving love advice in general, for example, you might want to specialize in love readings in tarot, because the certain cards that you see may remind you of some really helpful, valuable love advice that someone gave you, or you gave to someone else once, or really works for a lot of couples. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you're only as good as the words that and knowledge and wisdom that you already have, because the cards can't speak themselves. Now, if you're someone who has had years of practice of their intuition and you've kind of used that muscle to the point where you're just second nature when it comes to picking up on like gut feelings, that's fine. Like, I think a lot of psychics can work alongside tarot in that respect, where the art, the imagery can sort of trigger some messages or like steer their thoughts in a certain direction. But I think there's danger in becoming a little bit biased in a way, because some of the dark cards, such as the Ten of Swords, might initially look quite scary and dramatic, and you might get carried away with the number of swords on it, and you're like, whoa, this looks bad, there is hurt, oh my god, because some tarot cards are dramatic as hell. But you might accidentally skip over some important factors that you wouldn't have learned about some historical symbolism on the card, which represents change, transformation. The Ten of Swords looks dramatic, but if we don't know the meaning behind what the 10 can be, which is, you know, it's the 10 is about cycles and coming to an end of a cycle, it flips the definition a lot on its head. And actually, instead of freaking that person out, you can just become a little less attached to the art and a bit more grounded in the sense of like adding an additional part to the reading as well is key. Because sometimes when I'm kind of dry and I'm like, oh, I feel like I've said everything I need to say, I kind of scan back to stuff that I know to look out for. For instance, if I see that there's a lack of cup cards in a love reading, that might not be something that intuitively I picked up on, like, oh, there's not a lot of typical love element related cards in this reading. And then cards like Judgment, it can be a super positive card to receive, because it means inner calling, like a really positive guidance, your soul being lifted, and a really like enlightening moment happening in someone's life. But then it also can act as a little bit of a warning that judgments are being acknowledged at this time. Make good judgments. It can be that someone's watching to judge you, to assess you. So you kind of need to have all of these different like perspectives of what the cards can mean for your intuition to actually work with something other than the immediate like stuff that the art's going to give you when you see it. I think the problem with relying on just what you see and just the artwork is that you're probably going to have like an immediate feeling around that card that sticks with you all the time when you see that card. But there's a lot of value in remembering other, like considering other considerations, particularly when you've got a card that looks really positive in the center and you're like, God, this seems really great. And the next minute, all of these negative looking cards are coming out and you're like, I don't understand, because this looks good, this looks bad. And then it's like, oh wait, I can dig into my kind of archive that I've got in the back of my head in other angles of this card that I've learned previously. It can also mean the court cards, for instance. There's a massive difference in what a page is and what a king is, and even the elements. I wouldn't have necessarily picked up that the swords always means communication and the mind. I think a lot of people fear from sword cards because they look scary, but actually from a lot of research I've discovered that there's a fine line between what is actually there and what is just someone's like head space telling them that it's there. A lot of the swords are just like imagined up, their kind of head spaces, their toxic thoughts, those sort of things. So if I would have just got carried away with the imagery being scary, I'm going to give a lot of inaccurate readings to people about how like certain situations are bad for them and they should leave them. And really what I should be saying is, hey, you're thinking way too much to the point where you don't know what's wrong from right. Learning all this information doesn't take the power away from you as a reader. For instance, I can teach a child how to use a paintbrush in a certain way to get certain desired brush strokes in their work, or I can teach a kid how to mix certain colors together to bring desired results, or like I can teach them the color theory, but then they apply that knowledge to the imagination, the ideas, the creation that they have in their little minds. That's stuff I can't teach. That's stuff you won't be taught. You're kind of helping them, giving them a stepping stone, giving them like a head start to be able to do something their own way. And I think if you do the long way of skipping reading books and the definition, you're just sort of like, you'll be a good tarot reader by the time you're 80 years old, because you're going to read enough people by then to realize that, oh, that card always means this and this card always means that. You're kind of making yourself learn the long way. You may as well learn from people who have been doing it for years. Intuition really is a force that pulls us through what is the opposite of it. And the opposite of it is intellect. The stuff that we, know for a fact, is a matter of fact, is the truth. The intuition is the dark side, the black side of the yin and yang sign. Otherwise, we're essentially getting a tarot reading from a caveman, right? And he's just looking at these cards and saying, persistence, don't do that. Do something else instead. And we're not getting any kind of logic, connection to reality, or like, human intuitive like guidance. We're just getting the very, very, very basics, and we want to apply the basics to those that have learned a lot before us, in the same way as cavemen were the way they were because they didn't have all the years behind us that we now have, which gives us more wisdom, more intelligence, more, depth behind the stuff that we're doing, that we know, the intelligence. So that's the bottom line of it, really. I think you can't have one without the other, and I think that all intuition and gut really is just listening to that pull, that tug, that feeling, that vibe, the energy you get when you turn over a card and see it initially. Like, I think even earlier I had a reading for someone where there was 3 of swords, there was 10 of swords, there was 7 of swords, a lot of negative stuff in their friends and family position, but the whole time I wasn't picking up on like anything too bad, particularly because some were reversed and there was also a positive card nearby. But also I just didn't get that sense of dread within me, whereas for other people I'm almost like, you need to be careful of this person, like it just doesn't feel good. And I can't pick up on those things about tarot cards. I'm not a psychic. I don't pick up on a lot of stuff without a kind of trigger. Let those cards be triggers for you. I'm always working on my own intuition. I think I've got a lot to learn when it comes to differentiating between what intuition is and what is kind of just like the best logical thing to do. I guess it's like understanding the difference between your brain and your heart, but then there's also like your intuition. I feel like they all can sort of feel like different things, and I'm trying to do my best at working on that muscle, but I think it takes a lot of time because you need to apply it to your life to see how it feels differently when it works out. And like, you really want to get good at it in your own life first before you apply it to other people's life. If you're reading for other people in particular, you want to be able to trust it as much as possible so you can be very like sure of the information that you're handing across. What would be a really cool thing for you guys to do, if you could leave me in the comment section below how it is that you connect with your intuition. So how do you know when your intuition is calling you in comparison to when it's just like your head telling you to do a certain thing? or like you emotionally feeling that something's right, how do you know it's like in your gut, your intuition, your third eye? Like, how does it feel different to you? If you could explain it, I would love to know. I think that's a really interesting conversation to start in the comment section. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I'm on social media such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I have a tarot reading Facebook page and a tarot reading Instagram if you want to book a tarot reading with me. I'm also on an email address if you want to email me on there, and we can book a reading with you together with what? I can book a reading with you. Sending loads of love from my house to yours, and I will see you for my next video. Bye.